This week, we kick off the show with an interview featuring Greg Conti, principal at Copidian Security, to discuss ways to inform today's enterprise defense by better understanding strategy, tactics, and operational art from government influence operations, electronic warfare, and cyberspace operations. In the security news, social engineering and computer fraud ruled legally distinct. SpaceX's Starlink was hacked using a $25 homemade device. How I hacked my car. A single flaw broke every layer of security in macOS, ouch, and hackers attack UK water supplier, but extort the wrong company. All that and more on this episode of Paul's Security Weekly.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where exploits run wild, packets aren't the only things getting sniffed, and the cocktails flow steady. It's Paul's Security Weekly. Right now, everybody is talking about cryptocurrency, and the cybercriminals are hiding in the conversation. Cybercriminals use social engineering, loaded with urgency and fear, to successfully prey on your company, your employees, and your customers. Spear phishing is just one of 13 types of email threats. Barracuda has identified these 13 types and shows you how you can protect your company, your customers, and your reputation. Find out about the 13 email threat types and Barracuda email protection. Get your free ebook at securityweekly.com/Barracuda. That's securityweekly.com/Barracuda.
Before going on to his current illustrious career, he paid off his student loans in only 6 months by stripping under the name Hand Solo. It's the one and the only Larry Pesci.
Wow, I had forgotten about that. Thanks, Dr. Doug. And welcome to Paul's Security Weekly. This is episode 752, recorded on Wednesday, August 17th, 2022, right here in G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island. And as you notice, Paul is not here this week. He is the hardest man in podcast biz, and he's taking a vacation, so I will be your host tonight. But I am joined here in studio by the illustrious Dr. Doug.
Hello.
Hello.
They let me come back after the ban was lifted.
Wait, there was a ban? Oh, man. It's good thing it's been lifted. In any case,
we can't have nice things.
Wait, we had nice things?
Actually, no, we never had any nice things.
In any case, coming to us remotely, Mr. Joshua Marpet. Josh, welcome.
Pleasure to be back and finally sort of in my sort of prototype of an office. Getting there.
Nice shirt, by the way. Oh no!
Well, that's it for him then.
That shirt red screened to death Skype. So
yeah,
apparently
too much bandwidth for the shirt.
Apparently it was too good.
Yeah.
All right. So before we get started here, a couple of announcements. Don't miss any of your favorite Security Weekly content. Visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe to any of our podcast feeds and have all new episodes downloaded right onto your phone or your podcast catcher. You can also join our mailing list, Discord server, and follow us all on social media and our streaming platforms. So, coming up, we have some out-of-order stuff here in the teleprompter, because I didn't check that, but that's okay. In any case, we've got a fantastic interview with Mr. Greg Conti of Copidian Security come to talk to us about all sorts of military tactics and how they can be applied to enterprise and all sorts of fun stuff. So, Greg, welcome.
Hey, thanks. Really honored to be here. This was on my information security bucket list, so I'm really excited to be on the show.
Oh, excellent. I hope you brought your own bucket. It was funny earlier today, Greg. The folks at Security Weekly sent over a bunch of some of the background questions and some of the topics and stuff, and I couldn't find it for the life of me. In an order to be prepared for tonight, and I start searching through my email and for Greg Conti, and that was a mistake because there was a lot of emails mentioning your name for whatever reason. They were all good.
And my family members too, right? The Conti malware family.
I didn't even think about that. But there was also some other weird stuff, like a message from our local community-supported agriculture thing showed up for that. I have no idea why, but apparently the search algorithm in my mail stuff is broken.
A little broad.
Very.
Yeah.
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 Crazy. In any case, I got the stuff so I could actually be prepared. But as you probably know, knowing that this is on your security bucket list, one of the first questions we want to start out with is, how did you get your start in information security?
Okay. All right. Well, I'd say my start came with computing, right? And Commodore 64, actually a Texas TI 994A. But I didn't like it because it was too constrained. So eventually went over to Commodore 64, got a modem, 300 baud modem. And it all happened from there, I think. I liked that you could peek and poke memory on a Commodore 64. And seriously, that was the start, and just found my calling. Went to West Point and studied computer science. Then went out in the Army and did like tactical intelligence. Realized that I didn't want to do tactical intelligence one day when those camouflage nets they show over command posts.
Yeah.
Well, the lieutenants have to help put that up. And I remember being in a torrential downpour, stretched across the top of a van in a torrential downpour, trying to pull the camouflage nets together. It made me reevaluate exactly where I wanted to go in my career.
Yeah, you typically don't end up in a downpour pulling camouflage netting while you're sitting in front of a computer. So
yeah, I hope not. Yeah. And then went to a national security agency after that. Go ahead. Sorry.
It depends. I mean, it depends on what type of hacking you're doing. That makes you put the camouflage nets over your bunker. So we'll see. Anyway.
That's fair.
Or depending where in the world you are, right? Right, Josh?
Yeah, it's like Tyler should be on there somewhere. So,
yeah, exactly.
He's always the one that goes, "Oh, really? You've never pulled camouflage knitting over your laptop while you were waiting,
or over your bunker while you were,
in a torrential downpour, and there were monkeys chewing on you or something."
Totally. So, Greg,
they say it. Go ahead.
No,
Sorry.
go ahead.
They say it builds character.
Yeah.
Yes.
I one time I got to see a military. I don't know if they ever adopted it, but it was it was cool. It was an armored truck for the Army, and this was with a contractor that was building it, and it was completely covered with connectors on the outside for like fiber, and it was a rapid setup thing. So I got to see a demo of the whole thing. It was really cool. They pop these tents up, all these screens come out of the trucks, and then they hook it all in. But the question I asked was, I was like, so the truck is armored? And they were like, yeah. And I was like, so presumably the truck is going to get shot at? And he was like, yeah. And I was like, so who plugs all the cables into the outside of the truck? and he was like, that would be a specialist.
Lowest.
I was like, so you have a lot of those,
on
right?
The truck.
Yes.
He was like, yeah, they come by the dozen or something like that. So.
Yeah.
Oh.
So I have a good story along those lines. When I graduated, I went to pretty quickly into the Persian Gulf War, and I was wiring up a local area network, and we had like maximum stretch of cable between two nodes of the command post. And one day it stopped working, and we didn't know what had happened. It had been working great, and so we had to walk the cable to find out what happened. Well, it turns out in Saudi Arabia you can't just bury human refuse in the ground. You have to burn it. So one of the soldiers decided to set up a barrel on top of the cable, poured in the refuse and diesel or whatever on it, and proceeded to burn it right on top of the cable, and it burned through the cable.
That'll do.
So it. that was an interesting. Never expected to see that.
That'll do it. Reminds me of a story that I had back in the day. Was working with some folks from a fairly large networking company that got acquired over many years. And he met his wife in South America because he had been working for the company in South America as doing some technician stuff. And they had these two buildings that were separated by this warehouse, as it were. Two office buildings separated by a warehouse. And every day between 11:30 a.m. and 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the networking would break between the two halves, and they couldn't figure it out. Well, after months of trying to troubleshoot this, they found that the single Cat5 cable run that was connecting these two sets of switches was run up against this roof, right against the outside cladding of the roof on this warehouse, which wasn't insulated. And turns out if you get copper cable hot enough in the sun, it will actually change its electrical properties and fail to conduct electricity.
No.
So every day between 11:30 and 2 o'clock, it was hot enough to
sun was
change
on it,
the chemical properties of the cable so that it wouldn't conduct electricity.
Dude, now you're talking like the more magic switch. You know that story?
Yes. That's an awesome story.
Oh my God. So Greg, what's the weirdest thing you've ever seen in the military service?
Well,
Okay,
there was this general.
one of them. So I will say that I'm happy Black Hat does not hold conferences in New Orleans anymore, because I was like we were trying to get cadets exposure to interesting security conferences and people and research and all that. So I was in charge of taking about 25 cadets down to New Orleans, and I think it was like Black Hat Windows or something when they did like the specific Windows event. And the cadets, as I recall, were allowed to drink if they're over 21, and it was during Mardi Gras.
Oh God!
And if you've ever been to Mardi Gras, this was my first time. It was just the sea of humanity, right? And the conference hotel is right in the middle of this. So night comes, they go out on the town. I go in a bar, and it's packed. You can't hear anything. But on the TV in the corner, I see one of my cadets being interviewed by a news crew on the street.
Oh, no.
And so I don't know what he said, but I didn't get fired. So that's something you never want to see. You never want to take cadets to Black Hat in New Orleans and then see him being interviewed on television, because it's a bad day a bad day waiting to happen.
Yeah.
Greg, I used to bounce on Bourbon Street. You're lucky you found all your cadets again. Let's be clear here, okay? Oh my God.
Yeah, you could lose them. I mean, it's like a sea of humanity. There were 3, 50-foot crosses from a local church in the middle of the sea of humanity. It was just insanity. And so if I lost one of them and it didn't bring one back, I wouldn't have finished my career for sure.
Oh no.
Oh my God.
Oh. So, Greg, speaking of your career, how did you start applying to some of the things that you learned in the military and the government sector to enterprise security?
Okay, that's a good question. I mean, the military has been thinking about warfare for a long time, thinking about conflict for a long time, and they have this whole body of knowledge, that's described as doctrine, and it's time tested. Things like how to conduct intelligence operations at scale, right? How to do collection management for intelligence, how to do radio direction finding, how to analyze threats, how to conduct, it's called the FIRES process, where you start with your goals and you walk through your capabilities and your resources and then eventually plan missions. So there's this whole set of tools that the military had that were in military speak, mil speak, that had a great deal of potential, but they had to be mapped over because eventually our world in InfoSec, we started hitting state actors who were using similar techniques. It became looking a lot more like online conflict instead of just defending your networks. So that's kind of how I got into it, was mapping that stuff over, and it proved to be very useful.
Excellent. Yeah, I can definitely see some parallels there. And
yeah, you just have to convert it, right? I mean, like you said, when it comes out in military speak, you have to kind of translate all that into some kind of corporate, corporate speak, so that people can understand it.
You have to take the military acronyms and put them in
we were doing the same
acronyms.
thing with FEMA. We had all this FEMA stuff, and the FEMA stuff was the same way. In fact, I really like, this is my story. I went to this FEMA training because I was working with the state cyber disruption thing, and I opened the book and it says, FEMA says never use acronyms, and they had an acronym for it. I'm not even kidding. I don't remember what the acronym was, but right there, the very first page, it was like, never use acronyms. It'll confuse everybody. We have an acronym. It was literally the first page of the book. I was like, really? But yeah, that stuff is the same way, because when you try to take that back to corporate, you kind of, and police is the same way too. You have to take that back and translate it all to try and get it across in a different way, because sometimes the language is scary and sometimes it's just they don't know what you mean. So you have to translate all that stuff up to get it back.
And I think it also, you have to take into account, like, a lot of the doctrine was for like fighting on the land or the sea or the air. And now you're dealing with this thing that's cyberspace, right? or this information environment of information flying around on social media. So you have to kind of be able to translate it from the physical world into, what it means. And the laws of physics are, kind of defined by people listening on this call, right? The physics of cyberspace are really defined by people who create the network, right? So you have to kind of take that into account in the mapping. But yeah, sure, you have to translate the language for sure.
Do you think the military has moved forward? I mean, I know the answer to this really, but it's just for the sake of people watching. But do you think, when I first got involved with the military, with some of this stuff, it was with the Guard, and some of the stuff they showed me, I was kind of embarrassed for them. It was a long time ago, and they were very proud that they were doing something, I think. But when I was looking at it, I was going, guys, maybe not. But I mean, how far have they come? I mean, have they caught up with the bad guys at this point, and are they sitting there, defending against that?
So I think, we're like, when the Department of Homeland Security was first formed after 9/11, I thought it would just be, in my ignorance, I thought, it would just appear, right? And it would just be up and running almost instantly. But there was a growth period, and we're seeing it now, kind of starting to hit a stride almost 20 years later, right? Or about 20 years later. So I think with this, can't get too much into what NSA has done, but the things NSA does and has done for a long time, they're very, very good at and exceptional, really world-class at. Whereas, when this was formed, circa 2010, there was a lot of growing pains of, you're not just trying to do all the technical stuff, you're also trying to I hate to use it's overused, but build the airplane while flying it. You have to get all the infrastructure in place and make sure your funding's in place. So where are we today? I think, it's much more mature. The education training pipelines are in place. They've got the teams built. They're working on kind of when it all clicks. Militaries are good at engines. They can crank out. They're very efficient. They operate at scale once you go through that startup phase, which can be a decade. So yeah, I think we're much better off than we were, say, 10 years ago.
And what do you attribute that to? Is it the training that all of the operational folks are getting? Is it due to some of the other developments that have happened, say some very specific training for some of those folks for cyber stuff, or is it something else?
I think it's a combination of, it's really the hard work of a bunch of different people who go in and row as hard as they can, because I think it attracted a lot of believers. I call them true believers. They get information security, they get the hacker community, they're trying to do the right thing, so that they'll give it their all. And so I think really it's their hard work that's all coming together and coming to fruition over the years, and each of them chips away at this problem. Part of it's each person, taking part in a training course, building a training program, giving feedback on how to make it better, then going out and learning and feeding that back into, the procedures that they use in day-to-day operations. So I think it's just this ongoing thing, really on the backs of a lot of hard work by people who believe that it's important.
Can I ask you a bit of a controversial question?
Sure.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Josh, only if he's allowed to give you controversial answers.
Yeah, baby. Okay. You stated that you thought the NSA does great work. They've got some amazing people. I happen to agree with you. But there are some people that criticize what the military is doing, what the government is doing, and say we're far. And I'm going to name a name. Do you know Nick Chillane?
I do not.
Okay.
Nick Chillane?
Chillane. He was the CISO for the DoD.
Okay. And yeah, go ahead. Tell me a bit of the story, and I'll provide a controversial answer.
Sorry?
Tell me a bit of the story, and I'll give you a controversial anser.
Okay.
Of Nick Chillane's story.
Left the DoD stating that we're decades behind the Chinese. There's no way we're going to win.
Oh, yeah.
The DoD was starving all of the good programs of funding. Yeah, he's now got a podcast, Chilling with Chillane or something like that, where he basically excoriates the government and the DoD, stating that they're not doing what's necessary to bring our cyber warfare capabilities up to speed, up to par, do you know what I mean?
Yeah, so I think that's fair. I mean, I gave a talk a couple of years ago on hacking bureaucracy, because I wanted to give a technical talk. It was at AvengerCon, which is a conference run out of Fort Meade run by the younger mid-career, junior and mid-career people. It's kind of a hackerish conference. And I gave it on hacking bureaucracy because if you're going to do your job, you have to be able to do it sometimes despite the bureaucracy, or find a way to get it in your corner. So the fact that the government is inefficient and at times and is kind of forcing its way through this. I mean, I think those are all relatively valid criticisms. But I also know that if you look at other places around the world, you have to kind of do a relative comparison. That if you look at choose your country, there can be a disconnect of what the press says about reality and the true reality inside. So I think relative to other countries, we're doing well. Would be my take.
Okay. No, thank you. I'm curious because it's his comments and his rants, to be nice, have been very polarizing in the DC area, if you will. Yeah. And it's disquieting to hear that somebody who had such access to our military and our cyber warfare capability says, no, we're screwed, effectively. And it's nice to hear that maybe we're not as screwed as he says.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest. The bureaucracy will grind you down. At a certain point, I was forced to step away from the keyboard, which I love doing, and kind of fend off the bureaucracy so other people could do it, could do their jobs, their hands-on keyboard jobs, and that takes a toll, right? And I've written a few edgy articles myself, saying things that were broken to try and part therapy and part to kind of facilitate change. So it can take a toll on you. He probably has some valid criticisms in there mixed in with a lot of trauma from fighting the fight.
Valid
would be my guess. I don't know him.
No, valid. I was just curious. Thank you. Appreciate it.
And Greg, I think you've got some very valid comments in there, and certainly around the hacking bureaucracy. Because I think about this as this is coming to the true nature of what we do as hackers and penetration testers. We're looking for ways to circumvent or manipulate the system to have it do what we want. Yes. And yep. by hacking bureaucracy, as it were, I think this is very much one of those ways. This relates to a story that I just read this afternoon on Facebook from a friend of mine, Chris Blask, who's doing this amazing experiment, as it were, with some floating barges and boats, and he got pulled over by Coast Guard and police and that type of stuff today. And he said, I literally paid the fine that they issued to me because they had to issue me some sort of fine. But the money that I paid for that fine got me more information than I otherwise would have been able to get. That money that invested was hacking bureaucracy to get around, to find out all these other things to get him where he needed to go. And I thought that was kind of amazing.
Yeah, I mean, it's a skill that kind of is built in to many in the hacker community, right? We see this complex system as this bureaucratic complex system. Let me probe the perimeter of it and see if I can find its vulnerabilities, or how can I have it do what I want, right? So yeah, it actually built a 2-day course on it. I think first ever. It was a lot of fun to teach, just because it's a critical skill, and no one teaches it to you. Right? It's like you learn one lesson and then you learn another, and maybe your boss or whatever whispers in your ear with some advice, and then you keep going, and then it gets really strange the higher up you get, because then you get into this political layer, this Game of Thrones layer, where it's almost a different set of rules of how you're supposed to how the world works.
Yeah, you can only call this general after you already called that general, Because if you call this general first, the first general gets mad and then will take action to prevent you from ever talking to the second general, because that's just how at least when I was doing that kind of stuff, that was what we had to do. And there were all these secret, it was a lot like hacking and bureaucracy. We had all these books and guidance on, that people had written down about different things that you needed to do, and like, don't ever wear this color if you go to that guy's office, or this guy he'll get angry if your necktie is tied. Like, there was one about something about different kinds of knots in the neckties, and the guy would get upset. Now, they weren't going to do anything overtly, but they were just literally like tips people had written down, like, if you meet with this colonel first, he will get you in, otherwise you'll never get in. So you have to go take him to lunch, and then he will make the appointment. And if you do that, then you'll get in to meet with the guy that actually makes a decision. Otherwise, they'll schedule appointments and the guy will never show. And so we had all these like guidance like that was
That's
really
crazy.
useful. And it was a lot like hacking notes that you would see from somebody going, yeah, don't waste your time on this because it's not going to get you anywhere. So I like that. I think that's probably a really good course. I think a lot of students would benefit from a course like that, and a lot of people that are working in the industry would benefit from a course like that too, because in my experience, I've run into an awful lot of people who are very talented at what they do, but they were not very good at that part of it. And I call that being stuck in the chicken wire cage, because we used to have these two network engineers that were literally in a chicken wire cage in like the steam tunnel, and the rule was they're never allowed to come out. Like they went out through this exit and they came in through that exit, and they never associated with anybody else because they had caused so many problems. Because they would have fit in here, but most places no. It was just like, if you guys go up to the first floor, somebody will get offended right away because you're going to do something, or that shirt you're wearing is not going to go over very well. So just stay in the chicken wire cage. But people get to the point where they want to get out of the chicken wire cage. Some people, those guys didn't. They wanted to stay in the chicken wire cage. But some people start wanting to get out of there, and then they start running into all sorts of snags because they've never had that kind of training, and they don't have that nice guide that I had.
So I had about what you wear. I mean, sometimes the people, if they don't have the background, they just show that they're listening by picking out some minor flaw and giving you a hard time. I attribute it, I liken it to, the old cowboy movies where all the cowboys get drunk and they pull out their 6 guns and shoot at somebody's feet to make them dance. That kind of mindset, right? And the InfoSec or the cyber guy is the guy doing the dancing, or the gal. But I was briefing a senior leader and showed a picture of like this event. And at the time, we were in transition of uniforms, right? So it's like the older style uniform, like, green camouflage versus desert camouflage or whatever, right? The digital camouflage. And it was, both were legal. And this one person wore it because it was their thing. They thought, probably one of the best coders that I know. And the general pulls out, didn't say anything about the content of the talk and all the stuff that we, had briefed the individual on, pulled out a laser pointer and shoots it at the person in the older style camouflage and said, "Who is that?" Right? Like, why are you, like, that person's the best person I have, and you're concerned that they're, as a personal shtick, that kind of thing, are wearing an older uniform. So anyway, that individual has since retired, and the person in the old style camouflage uniform is still in doing good things. So we won, but
and
it's frustrating.
And wearing the correct style camouflage now.
Yeah. At the time, it was authorized, and now he's wearing the current stuff.
Okay,
some insanity for sure.
Gotta love it. I mean, this kind of speaks a little bit to the military sort of being slow to adapt and adopt. And do you think that's sort of happening around the cyber capabilities, or are we taking care of some of that? And how much of that are we filling in with contractors and such?
So don't let me forget to answer the contractor question. So I think what they're trying to do, like, I was involved when we were first picking, at least on the Army side, the people that would be involved on the leadership side, on the officer side. And we tried to find people that were believers and kind of had this is what they did. And by default, they're like kind of had a hacker mindset, or involved with the hacker community, ideally. And the trust is, and what I've seen is that they're trying to create pockets. As I tried to create a bubble or a shield around my organization, they're doing the same. So they're trying to create places that people can innovate and do what they should do. So although that being said, it isn't perfect. And I would say some people slip through, and then, at Fort Meade, there's this thing. You'd always get the person who came in and said, I don't care about the mission, the SIGINT mission. We need to take all our analysts and linguists on a ruck march of like 14 miles with a heavy backpack or something. And I'll tell you, that isn't morale builder. So you still have some of that today. But we also, it's unsettled what the culture will ultimately be. But I'm hoping that people are actually really good at this domain will win out, and we'll have some, so it's an ongoing fight. Onto contractors, the ones I worked with were very good. Sometimes they were forced to wear suits, and I felt for them. like God, you couldn't pay me enough to have to wear a suit, and do like hands-on keyboard work or whatever. But I found good people. So I think right now they're trying to build in-house. I have less visibility, so this is speculation. But I see people working really hard on the uniform side and the government employee side to be really good at what they do, and I think they're supplementing with contractors, would be my guess. But I don't see it all being a contractor-run show because there's some serious talent that we recruited in and exists today that can hold their own, and they won't just be run over by outside experts who just say, okay, don't worry, you sit over on the side and sign the documents. I don't sense that at all.
I think I know that they just got one of my really good students who was in ROTC and wanted to serve and all this, and he wants to serve in that kind of capacity because he's really good. So you're seeing that more now. And there was a time not that long ago when I didn't have very many students who would even considered such a thing. They would, you were like, I'm not joining that. I'm not doing that stuff. But now we're starting to see people that see that as a career option and a career path, because I think part of that's because there's people like yourself or people like Rob Lee and people that were military background that are out in the public now, being leaders and being people that have great amounts of skill. And so that sort of, I think, ideology that the military doesn't know what it's doing kind of went away. And now students can see that and go, oh, I want to do that. I want to serve, but I want to be in the hacking corps or whatever it's called. So an Intel group.
Yeah. I think that's fair. I think certainly doing like initial go to ROTC, spend 4 or 5 years in, you go through some great training. You get to do some missions legally that you couldn't do anywhere else, and make some great contacts, get some great experience, and then after that you can decide to stay or not. I think there's a lot going for it these days. The trick will be creating a culture which is still unsettled. Right, there are certainly warts. I don't want to say it's all roses, but creating a culture where people feel valued and want to stay. I know that they're working hard on that. It's a work in progress, though.
Well, getting away from the military for a second, I know it's fun to talk about, but another thing that you were talking about was online conflict. And one of the questions I was interested in asking you was, you see a lot of this, and I get calls from people asking me about it, about Intel collection, Intel data collection for your company. And there's quite a number of companies out there right now that are doing that. And do you see that as being worthwhile to get these people that are doing military style intelligence gathering about my company or whatever, about Security Weekly or what have you, and if so, how far down that chain do you think that goes? I mean, obviously that's probably not a disadvantage if you're IBM. I mean, you're a giant multinational, you're all over the world, they probably had people doing this kind of stuff before. But when you start getting down into the mid tiers and the smaller, organizations, does this work? I mean, is this kind of intelligence gathering worth it?
So I guess two things. One is, I think are you talking about people like coming out of the service with intelligence backgrounds, finding usefulness in companies, or are you talking about something else?
Mostly what I'm talking about is people coming out of military organizations who did intelligence collection, like your resume says, and they take those same skills and then apply them to collecting information from the dark web, from the internet, and so on. As a mechanism for but now instead of worrying about the United States as an entity, they're worrying about IBM as an entity.
Yeah, so I think it actually the intelligence analysts, people have intelligence background. What they're taught are frameworks and tools and techniques, like analytic tools and techniques. Intelligence preparation of the battle space or battlefield is one. Center of gravity analysis is another. And I think a lot of those tools, I mean, when you're an analyst, you pop over to different domains. I mean, one day you may be worried about country X, another, and you may get moved over to worry about country Y or a particular subset of their economy. So I think that type of background actually maps over really well, almost in any commercial civilian analyst job. It's just a different domain. It'll take a while. Like the frameworks are all super flexible and will apply. They know where to reach and where to look up more to get tools, tools and techniques, because many of it's already out there and freely shared from the government. Department of Defense shares tons of stuff on intelligence. So yeah, I think it's a matter, they'll have to get up to speed on a particular country or set of threat actors they're worried about. But I think it works really well as far as mapping it over.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree. I mean, that was sort of my take on it as well. I mean, it was a rather expensive service, and I don't know that everyone's going to benefit from that equally. I mean, obviously, if I've got the DoD budget, I can afford all kinds of intel signals analysis stuff. But when I'm a company and I make, I don't know, grommets, maybe I can't afford to do that kind of intel. So what do you think happens to those companies then as these online conflicts start to spill over when you can't afford that kind of signals intelligence? So you don't have the State Department, keeping up with things.
Yeah, so that's really concerning, right? If you look at the various sectors of the economy, right? Like you look at the financial sector, the big banks and things, they've got truly robust, world-class, in cybersecurity and intelligence and all of that. And then as resources get scarcer and scarcer, you move down to like mid-sized companies, small companies, state and local government. Then it gets really concerning. I don't think we have, as a community, have solved that problem. We're trying to find ways of like a certain amount can protect themselves pretty well, but as you go lower and lower, they get less and less defenses. The RSA vendor will try and sell them a solution, but that isn't going to solve it. So I think we have a lot of work to do at the middle tier and for from the home user up to local size companies or even small companies.
Yeah, there was a story. There was a story in the news this week that they found 9,000 VNC servers that had no passwords, no restrictions that you could just connect to, and a whole bunch of them were in infrastructure type organizations. And a lot of those places that I've talked to and seen, and I used to run exercises for some of them, and you're going, you guys don't have anything. You have no people, you have no budget. You went and bought a little, Wi-Fi router at Best Buy and connected it to the internet, and and that's connected to your ICS, and that's not a good thing. So I think there's a big problem there, and maybe, and I know you don't control this, but maybe that is a sign that we need to do more, at the national defense level to help some of these people with some of the resources DoD and other people like that have, because they don't have resources, and telling them to fix it is just like, well, great, are you going to come fix it for us for free? Because I've had people say that to me before, like, are you working here for free? And it's kind of it's kind of terrifying when you're like, well, I don't really want to go spend thousands of hours fixing all your systems for no money, but I do feel bad.
Yeah, so I mean, I've seen things. I think Department of Home. Go ahead. Sorry.
I'm going to dispute both of you for a little bit. I mean, I helped to write CMMC, which is the Department of Defense standard for contractors, all 300,000 or more contractors that the DoD has.
And see, I thought you were going to say I thought you were going to say pages on the CMMC, but okay, never mind. Sorry.
Pages on the CMMC.
Yeah, thinking that the CMMC, the documentation was going to be 300,000 pages. Never mind. Bad joke.
Oh no, it's a lot bigger. It's a lot bigger than that.
Don't go there. It's possible. Okay, seriously.
But, it's actually probably bigger than that. Yeah. Volumes 1 through 75.
The thing is that prior to CMMC, like they had, you had to be NIST 800 171 compliant, and my personal estimate is that single-digit percentages, 5-7% of all contractors were compliant. So while I agree with you, Greg, that banks and companies of that large financial size or large size have a lot of resources to do that kind of cybersecurity. And then as you go down to where Wendy Nather calls it the cyber poverty line, I love that saying.
That's a good,
I like that. Yeah.
I mean, that she was just like on the money. I was like, perfect. I've quoted her on that for, I think, the last 5 years now.
Mm-hmm.
I love it. But Wendy, you're awesome. Please come back on the show. Okay. But, it's tough. It's very tough. And you run the VNC servers, like Doug said. You've got, Vis had the camera wars. Mm-hmm. He literally would just Google dork for cameras, and you'd have two cameras side by side, and it would go, which one's more interesting? And you'd click on one. And they actually rated cameras that way, just random, webcams on the internet and security cameras on the internet. It's worse than we're saying. And fixing it is going to cost more than we're saying. And the idea that big companies have to be part of the solution is, I'm going to push back a little, and I'm going to say it's not really something they give a crap about to be part of that solution.
Yeah.
So my question,
ultimately,
if I was going to be pushed to have a question, I'm sorry, Greg, I cut you off again, but what are the force multipliers? What are the strategies? What are the things that small companies can do and that big companies can take advantage of? What are the military tactics and strategies they can use? What are the frameworks that the military is using that corporations and commercial world isn't using? Talk to us.
So I think one thing is this concept of collective defense. We see it with NATO. Attack against one is attack against all, that kind of concept. We're in this together. And I did a lot of work with a previous employer in that space. But the idea is, how do you lift these, smaller players up? And, ultimately it comes down to like incentives in one way, or zero cost, right? So like in a sector, is your sector better off or worse off if the low-hanging players are, owned? Right. So maybe like there is an incentive to try and keep, things like sharing information, like information sharing, training together, maybe inviting them to your training, things that like cost efficient ways that they could work together. Maybe there's a sector level SOC, security operations center that can be formed to get people working together, building trust. So maybe there are tools and techniques that can be shared, or having a chat channel that everyone can be on, right? In a trusted circle, right? Building trust amongst each other. So I think there's power in working together. If we try and do it all individually, we can't. Like ultimately, that will fail. It doesn't scale, and things are moving too fast.
This reminds me a lot. This reminds me a lot of what I saw out of some of the like the ISAC type of groups.
Yep.
Higher education ISAC, medical ISAC, and all those types of things. Like, it wasn't so much a collective defense, but it was very much an information sharing type of thing, which I think they could take further based on that collective defense.
Same thing with fusion. After 9/11, they created these fusion centers in all the cities, because traditionally law enforcement didn't talk to other law enforcement. Right. They didn't. And the idea was, what if federal law enforcement like FBI would actually share some stuff that they knew with everybody else, because it might help if they say, well, this guy here is a dangerous criminal, you might not want to let him into your community, or at least keep an eye on him. And they started doing that and they're doing that with cyber intelligence. They're doing it with all those kind of things. So I do think that exactly what Greg is talking about is something that's coming. It's not, I don't think it's quite here yet, but we're starting to get down that road where at least I can speak for Rhode Island in that, our computer crimes police, they started reaching out to industry and saying, look, we're not just a bunch of jackbooted thugs that if you call us, we're going to come kick the door down. We're actually going to come try to help. And they are sharing that information. They're sharing intel with businesses. They're sharing intel with the FBI. And all that's very useful in defending against some of this stuff, especially for people that are below the cyber poverty line, because they have no resources. So just getting a notification that this is a problem is helpful.
Awesome.
Yeah, I think we're talking about network effects in many ways with this collective defense, right? When you just have two people working together, there's a startup cost of getting people working together, and as you build the infrastructure that allows them to work together, then you get more and more people. Then I think that hopefully we'll hit a tipping point. At least we can hope, right? I think we need to. If we continue to fight individually, I think we're going to have problems. Continue to have problems.
I agree.
Interesting.
I mean, it's an infinite series you're fighting.
Yep.
So you can't do that, in a single silo. You're going to get annihilated. I don't care whether you're a giant company or a little tiny company. You're just going to get wiped out when there's an infinite number of monkeys out there to run attacks on you.
Exactly.
They eventually will succeed.
Exactly. So, Greg, is there anything else you wanted to bring up? I know I'm looking at the list of things that was sort of in some of the setup calls. Is there anything else you wanted to sort of bring up and touch upon before we wrap up?
Well, I think we're seeing something really unique coming out of Ukraine. I mean, we've all thought of insider threats, right, and seen the effect that people have had. And then we've seen, Russia invading Ukraine. And, as I study the problem, what I see emerge from it is how public sentiment, drives your adversary, or creates adversaries. And that's I don't know if you've seen charts, we probably all have, that list various threat actor types. Like you got the individual, you got the hacker, you got the insider threat, you got various hacker collective groups of different flavors, companies and state actors, all of that. Well, what we've seen with come out of, really driven by public sentiment and Russia's actions, is that that whole chart, normally we see one or two, being involved in a given thing. But with what happened in Ukraine, that chart lit up like a Christmas tree and everybody was involved. 1,000 companies plus companies have been involved, 100 various hacker groups, 50 countries, Ukrainian memes forces, Ukrainian IT army, so, kind of fueling it, fueling the public sentiment and all. So I think we're seeing that public sentiment drives the creation of adversaries, including insider threats. So to me, I thought that was really interesting when I kind of stumbled across it.
It's interesting. I think about this from maybe a little different perspective with all of those groups, those threat actors and all those types of folks coming together. I think one of the other ones that maybe many folks don't think about, specifically when we start talking like some of the military actions and some of the stuff that I've seen, like you talk about maker culture. Mm-hmm. And maker culture has been a huge boon, and maker culture often involves nowadays some technology. Like I saw some videos and did some research into the background of it about some drone makers that are relatively local to Ukraine with drones assembled from off-the-shelf parts using to drop ordnance on Russian tanks. And this ordnance, from my understanding, is a half pound of plastic explosive with 3D printed fins stuck to them. Like, this is amazing. Like, amazing use of technology, and some of those groups that maybe you wouldn't have thought of getting involved in some of this from both a technology and a physical perspective.
Yeah, the idea of battlefield makers.
3D print guidance systems.
Yeah.
Well, it was very interesting to watch that evolve. I mean, to see, basically every hand turned against you, and this underdog fighting this, superpower, and literally, like I remember that video of the guy with the cigarette taking the anti-tank mines out of the road and just, he's got his carried over the side of the road and puts it down, and you're like, okay, yeah, that's it's gonna be tough to beat these guys.
Yep.
At least with a conscript military, and yeah. So it's an interesting thing to watch, and I saw that too. The makers getting involved in building all kinds of elaborate things, and if it's your country being invaded,
sure.
I mean, if somebody wants to invade Rhode Island, they're going to have to deal with you. And
oh God, oh God.
I know, right? I'm hiding behind Larry the whole time.
Yeah, human shield, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. Well, Greg, thank you so much for coming on the show. Sure. It has been a pleasure. I can't wait to have you back on the show because we could probably do this for another 2 or 3 hours, I'm sure. So I think that's an open invite to come back and talk some more with us.
Thank you. Yeah.
So
my pleasure.
I hope your bucket list was satisfied.
Yes. And
it was
a couple more things on.
And everything you ever dreamed of, and more.
Greg,
all your dreams will come true.
Yeah, Greg, please come back. It's a pleasure talking with you. We'd love to have you back on the show anytime.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, with that, we are going to take a quick commercial break and come back with the security news, so stay tuned.